Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me this morning is Cory McGookin, a retired FBI special agent and former chief of the renowned FBI National Academy, where he led one of the world's top leadership programs. With over 20 years in law enforcement and leadership, Cory blends real-world experience with deep expertise in emotional intelligence, decision-making under pressure, and cognitive science. A certified ICF coach and longtime instructor at the University of Virginia and University of Richmond, Cory's leadership philosophy integrates insights from evolutionary psychology, neuroscience, and behavior patterns to help leaders understand how the brain shapes decision-making and team dynamics. As the founder of Sapient Cipher, he now works with executives to decode their unique leadership algorithm, the habits and blind spots that define how they lead in critical moments. Cory believes modern leadership development must move beyond the classroom and into real-world context. From the Air Force to the FBI to coaching leaders across industries, Cory brings a unique lens to resilience, self-awareness, and high-impact leadership, helping people lead with clarity, empathy, and purpose. And I'm always happy to welcome a fellow veteran here to the podcast. Good morning, Cory. How are you today?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me here today.
Hey, great to have you. Just to lead in, I want you to know that for a number of years, I think 12 years, I was a guest instructor at the FBI Academy, where I brought my leadership impact simulation, and we did a little over a day of simulation work. We have very similar interests and ideas, Cory and I, in terms of what I would refer to now as leadership under duress, how to make decision-making under duress impactful training mechanism. So we're going to get into a part of that as we get down here. So Cory, let me ask you the first question, and that is, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Where did you grow up, and what were some of the influences in your life?
Thank you, John. I'll cover this briefly. I grew up in a suburb outside of South Bend, Indiana. My father became disabled when I was very young. I was raised on government assistance and a very naive kid, not very socially aware. And I went to college for a semester, but I ran out of money. I couldn't continue. So for me, the Air Force was such a big part of getting me out of my hometown, seeing the world, meeting new people, growing in so many ways. And I think that's where I got interested in leadership, just wanting to be better, wanting to learn how to be a better participant and help people. Fortunately, that career led me to the FBI, which led to the things that look like successes on my resume. That leadership topic's always just been there for me. I call myself a leadership nerd. I've just always been trying to crack that code.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I can remember when I first became a naval officer, you weaned on the stories of the great leaders in World War II, Spruance and Nimitz and Halsey, those folks. They were magical characters. For me, it was always an interest as well. is trying to figure out what was the magic those guys brought to the table. We can go on about that for ages. I want to get into what we wanted to do today in terms of talking about leadership practice and the changing nature of leadership in the world we live in today.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question. You describe every leader as having the leadership algorithm. What does that mean, and how can understanding that help someone lead more effectively?
Yeah, so I do like the word algorithm because we're used to that, and it's what your feed looks like on social media. It's this mathematical sequence of the order in which things show up. And I think that's in us from a lifetime of experiences and education and things we've done. I get really nerdy about the brain, that it exists to keep you alive and take shortcuts and conserve energy. So we're typically not really thinking through things day to day. We get into these patterns and habits in the way we do things, almost like how you do anything is how you do everything. That becomes your algorithm. And sometimes that serves you and means you're a good fit for something. Sometimes it doesn't serve you. And what can you do to go in and tweak that? It depends, right? One position, you may be a great fit because of that, but you get promoted and now it doesn't work for you anymore. So I think we should be constantly tweaking that algorithm to fit our needs at the moment.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you just before we started the podcast, I'm now diving into this notion of a leadership operating system for the world in which we live today, the post-COVID, artificial intelligence driven, hyper developed world that unfolds every 6 hours, it seems. And people not looking just for a paycheck anymore. They want some level of fulfillment in their life. They want to matter to the things they do. They want to have values aligned with the organization. It's interesting to see how the algorithm may be shifting from what we thought leadership is to the world where we are today. Any reflection on that?
Yeah, I tell you, John, I still spend a lot of time working with law enforcement. And I've become a nerd in AI, mostly Chat GPT, but understanding things are changing, your algorithm better keep up with the changes that have already happened, will continue to happen, and at faster rates. So when I get in front of law enforcement audiences and ask them how engaged they are with this, it's rare. And my call to action is, if you want to be a leader in 10 years, you better start today learning this stuff, because your decisions as a chief of police is going to be on how much money you spend on different resources. You got to understand the world's going to change, and it's not going to be like it always has been. If you haven't kept up, I think you're going to be left behind as a leader.
I think you're absolutely right on the money. I talked to Michael Gerhardt from Germany, and I remember him because what he said was this idea that leaders in the old dynamic had the largest megaphone, right? In other words, it was broadcast all the time. He said, we're moving now to a place where the key word is not how loud you can be, but how much resonance you can connect with. I've worked for years with law enforcement, not only with the law enforcement people in your group, but also with the community as well. What's the resonance with the community and the community-based organizations, folks like that? How can you resonate with that? It has been changing. It is changing, and it's going to change even more and get faster. It's going to be interesting to see. I want to go on to another question here, sort of in the same vein. You said leadership development needs a redesign. In your view, what's missing from traditional training, and what should modern leadership development look like instead?
This is something I focus a lot on, John, and I really reflect on my career of teaching and training. And I can see a lot of it didn't stick because it was just classroom based. It was a come in for a 40-hour, 5-day, we'll throw a bunch at you. But as I look back on what was retained and what behavioral changes do we see because of that time spent, often it's not a good return on investment. And to me, it's a silly little thing. but often when I have a class, I'll have someone come up in front of the class and do this thing where they point at their finger. And I'm like, hey, do that. Simple directions. Point a thumb, switch. And they can't do it. I'm like, why? Well, because I've never practiced, right? That synapse in the brain to do that has not yet been formed. As like information alone doesn't change behaviors. It's just a good thought or an interesting idea. So, I'm into micro training, just-in-time training. The classroom is not a real crisis. Ethics in a classroom is very difficult because it's easy to say, oh, here's what I would do. That's easy to say in a classroom, but put the real situation, the real social pressures, and the real results from being that whistleblower or whatever it might be, and everything changes. So I think we need to take more and more out of the classroom, have training be shorter iterations, more real world, so that synapse can actually fire and we can actually build that into something we can actually do rather than something we know.
I'm reveling in what you're talking about because of 2 points I'd like to make. Number one is I make a difference between leader development, which is the classroom kind of thing you're talking about, right? You could have more empathy, be a better person, smile more, whatever the thing of today is, as opposed to leadership practice and action. Okay. So I make a differentiation there. And you're absolutely right. Unless you go out and practice it or try it in some form, the synapse will never form. The experience, the subjective experience will never translate into behavioral change.
Amen.
So as you well know, I am huge in the world of simulations.
Yep.
And that's what I do at the academy was I bring a real world scenario, 6 or 7 episodes or whatever it was, and do my best to bring real world experience into the classroom so they could try different things. They could feel it and see it and be part of it. Because one of the greatest experiences I ever had was being involved in simulations in the military and decision making under duress, which is a great trainer.
Yeah.
And as you well know, because it starts to form experiences. You have this experience. So I'm with you 100%. 1,000%. This in a classroom, to me, it's like the world's biggest spaghetti throwing contest. We just keep throwing stuff at people and hoping something sticks.
I've done it.
Yeah, we've all done it. And you sit back and say, no, this is not working. They're going to walk out of here and they will not have had the opportunity to make some, hopefully, transformative change. I'm just so happy to hear you say that because a lot of people, and you get on LinkedIn and all you see all the time is the same old stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. So thanks for that. I appreciate it very much.
Just real
Go
quick,
ahead.
John, one more story of something working out better than I expected. I was teaching new agents how to develop sources back in the day. It was all classroom based. And it was like, have rapport and these things that, again, it's just knowledge. Well, I was able to move that into practicals with role players. And the people we brought in the FBI come from the best schools, best backgrounds, great. But we put them in situations with, you're going to a tattoo shop. You're dealing with people who aren't from the Ivy League schools. And then they had to live go in and have a conversation and build some rapport and try to learn from this person. I did it in a fishbowl style where not only were they doing that in a real feeling environment, but they had 4 or 5 classmates watching them. In the debrief, you would really learn how you did, how you were seen in that moment. But a big advantage came from classmates where they would learn from watching somebody do it. And when that person said, I thought my lie about who I really was, I sold it well. And when 4 classmates say, dude, no, you're a terrible liar. That was horrible. What a learning moment that is about your actual abilities to do things that you think you can do. and for them to witness why it didn't seem right and it wasn't done right. I'm also big into that group training where you're learning from each other with real situations and all that. I found that's one of the best ways.
One of the best things I saw on the FBI Academy campus, I wish you'd talk about Hogan's Alley.
Absolutely.
You know, that's taking it to where it really needs to go.
World.
Why don't you talk about Hogan's Alley?
Yeah, they joke it's the world's most dangerous city where there's a bank robbery every day. But it's a small town. Some things are facades, but a lot of things are real. There's a real hotel not operating, but when you bring in all the role players, you can do a real scenario where you have to go learn how to safely do an arrest in a hotel room. Do you go to the manager's offices, talk to the manager? Do you go to the room? Like there's a bank, there's a pharmacy, there's a movie theater, there's all these things. And that's why I think the training is really effective because, again, taking it out of the classroom and saying practically, can you make decisions based on real world circumstances and little curveballs we throw at you while that's happening?
Yeah. It truly is transformative.
Mm-hmm.
It changes people. It changes behaviors. It changes their approach to work, especially if you've got a young agent and they're in the middle of the scenario. They're trying to make the arrest or they're trying to talk to the role players and they come away and haven't done a good job. Their shirts are soaked with sweat. They're amped up trying to get this thing right. And you sit back and you walk away and their eyes, you know, the size of silver dollars. But yet, the beauty of that is they're going to remember.
You learn from that.
They're going to remember. They're going to say, you know what? I screwed that up. And maybe 2 weeks from now, when I get another shot, I'm going to be a lot smarter than doing that.
Yeah.
And you can't replace that. You cannot replace that. And I think, and let's make a jump here. I think it would be so valuable for people in everyday businesses.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your ideas and reflection on.
Well, that's what I'm all about. Sometimes it's hard to simulate real world things in certain circumstances. But with my company, we use an escape room type scenario. There's decision making, pressure, teamwork, communication. And it may not be a situation you actually are going to do in real life for your company. But what I think people need to do is be exposed, like how do they really react in certain situations? Because like I said, that algorithm's already kind of built in. You have the way you are. And sometimes you don't even really know what that is until you're put in the moment. So creating that moment to see, do you short circuit a little bit and stop communicating? Do you become an internal thinker and nobody around you knows what's happening? Do you start barking out orders? Do you stop listening to people? Any of these things that could be negative and the things that are positive that you can see. Hey, when stuff hits the fan, here's how I react and here's how it works. And one thing I always go to, John, getting back to the military, is I got some friends here. We're Marine helicopter pilots. You train somebody to go up in the air in a helicopter and turn off all the engines and say, now fix it. You can learn to get through that stress and become, that's just something I can do. And that's what we're capable of, but not without being in the situation and learning to do it over and over.
Right. I absolutely agree. And I think that one of the beautiful parts of simulations, you know, realistic, I always like to say the more realistic, the better, because as you say, I devoted a rather significant portion of my book to brain mechanics, how the brain learns, how it takes experiences and simulations and transfers them into what Gary Klein calls RPD, recognition prime decision making, how it builds a file drawer of things. And when something difficult it faces an individual, they basically in a nanosecond run through the file drawer and say, oh yeah, this looks like this, and pulls out the file and says, this is how I'll make a decision here. Two things I want to talk about subject is, number one, you can't change mental models unless you understand what that mental model is, or in your terms, what that algorithm is. Mm-hmm. So putting people under duress to make decisions, their mental model floats to the top. You've seen this 100 times. Now you've got something to work with. Now the teachable moment appears, and you can do something really worthwhile in that area. The other thing that people don't understand about behaviors is there's a difference between a behavior and an intended action. You can't change a behavior just by talking about behavior change. You have to take a subjective intended action that alters it. Unless you understand what that behavior is, you can't make those changes. You will never make behavior change by just talking about it. It doesn't work. So anything you'd like to come back with on that, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I'm most excited, that I think AI and that might help us do that better. And just as a quick example, I work with a company and we do coaching. And my coaches are good, but I want them to get better and better and better. And sometimes they're not getting enough coaching to really up their skills. So we played around and we were able to use ChatGPT to build digital clients that you can then coach. I'm blown away at how accurate it can serve as a true human client that you have to coach well to get the right results. Since it knows every word you said, it can give you a score based on our ICF standards. You got a 6 out of 10 on this, a 7 out of 10 on that. And then if you are not satisfied, you can do it again, and you can do it again. I think that's the world that's exciting. AI can't be used for everything, but I think as we start looking at it, there's going to be a lot of uses for that.
Yeah. And not even talking about virtual reality now.
Mm-hmm.
How you can put someone in a scenario in virtual reality and a difficult, complex scenario where they're getting feedback, instant feedback on certain actions, behaviors, if you will. Any thoughts on the use of virtual reality?
Yeah, I think that absolutely has to be the next step. Putting all the senses together in a way. And this may seem odd, but when I was coaching my daughter's softball, fast pitch softball team, very competitive, I found on the bases they weren't getting it. So I rigged a little, what's the cameras, the GoPro on a helmet and created a situation. And I was narrating, like, so you got my point of view where I'm looking at the batter, the pitcher, leading off. And I'm talking through the thoughts in my head. I found that really hit with them. They could see how someone who's good at this, what they're thinking, what they're doing. So that's really basic, and there's so much more we can do. But I think it's not only putting yourself in this situation, but being able to observe others in that situation and get in their head and then put yourself in that situation. With law enforcement, I was looking at a similar thing where we started making these virtual simulations where you're walking through an area and, you know, the camera point, like you're looking at people's hands. That's what we're taught, right? That's where the threat is. Watch the hands. So like, did you notice this guy over here that he made this movement? Did you notice this? And to start bringing that awareness of everything around you, that's a lot to take in, especially when you're new and not seasoned. But that kind of virtual reality training, safe practices before you go do the real dangerous thing, is where we have to move to.
Yeah. I think virtual reality will be a great help, but I have a certain reservation.
Okay.
When you look at, this is a leadership perspective.
Okay.
If you take a look at the various AI tools as they exist today, ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Copilot, Claude, Notebook LM, those kinds of things. One of the best pieces of advice I got on an AI system was pick one and learn that one really well.
Okay.
Dive into that. My preferred right now is ChatGPT, but I do have a Perplexity account and I'm experimenting with that. To me, it's an experiment. But when you look from a leadership perspective, and again, my theme this year is the future of work, meaning is the new money. People are still searching for a sense of meaning. The problem I see is this. If you remove all the constants, AI being a constant, different people will choose different systems, and that's fine. That's great, no problem. But that becomes a constant. So the variable still remains the individual. what can that individual do to contribute to the development of their organization?
Yeah.
In the end, the leadership piece, we have to see people as the variable and applying leadership, the new algorithms, the new operating system, as I like to say, is going to have, I think, more of an effect based on how can you create an environment where people can come and where their contribution is honored, if that makes sense. Because almost AI is going to be neutral in some respects. What about the person that uses AI? To quote Jensen Huang, I quote Jensen Huang all the time. Never have to worry about somebody taking your job. You have to worry about somebody who understands how to use AI taking your job, right? Once you get people who know how to use AI to take a job, it comes down to the people again. If you have any reflection on that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I do. That's a very interesting thought in that if everyone's using AI, we're all at that level. So what's the competitive advantage of hiring you? What do you bring? I think the hope is, right, that the AI, just like calculators made, I don't have to know everything about math. I can plug it into a calculator. So I need to bring something else. So I think it really becomes that strategic mindset, putting different pieces together. I think that's where people are going to make the difference. Now, your experience is going to matter. You've been there, you've done it, you've seen how people react. You can maybe be a little predictive of what might happen. But I think it's, hey, I want AI to go do the grunt work, to go do the research and pull in all this stuff, but I need to be the person who takes that and makes decisions based on not only that, but all of my lifetime of experience and knowledge. It makes me unique. And that, John, here's where I think you're like dead on. People are seeking meaning, and meaning doesn't mean I'm basically writing prompts and giving it away. I need to bring me into the calculation. So where do I bring value and show I matter?
I think it's a very interesting dynamic in terms of the changing algorithm. How do we now see this shift occurring in such a way that people find meaning? The value of people is even more so because of what they bring to the table in terms of their value systems. One of the things I've been talking about lately is engaging people. I'll say, hire for values, hire for heart, meaning hire people. If you're looking to have someone join your organization, you better make sure their values and the organization's values are linked up. They'll stay 5 or 6 years. They may leave after 5 or 6 years, not because they don't like you, but because it's time to move on. It's just, I need to get more experience. I need to work in a new AI or coding system. And the other thing is hire for heart. Look for people who may have had difficult upbringings. For example, I've been blessed with some of the absolute wonderful people that I have had on my podcast, 3 of whom have been to prison. All 3 of them would tell you that prison saved their lives. All 3 of them are entrepreneurs that own several businesses now, came back from such difficult times. And the reason I talk about heart is because people who have heart know how to get through difficult times.
Yeah.
They know how to reorient and reclaim, get right with life. And in fact, one guy I was talking to him this week, Ken Miller, was a 3-time felon. It took 2 times to get, it didn't stick the first 2 times. But now he's an AI revolutionary.
Yeah.
And he owns several businesses. He's a dad. He's a granddad. He has, children and grandchildren. An incredible man. Just released a book called Becoming Ken, talking about his life experiences. I think that hiring for heart and values are the keys to bringing people in that can actually matter to an organization. Any thoughts on that?
I think that can be a good thing that we're moving towards. Let's take a quick example of doctors. They ran a test of diagnosing, whatever health issue. And it was like ChatGPT was at 94% accuracy, where real life doctors were. Well, then they're like, okay, let's combine doctors with AI And it was still lower than the AI itself because they were bringing their biases. So to me, what's interesting about that is like a doctor's, what he brought was always, I can figure out what's wrong with you. If you start taking that away, what if it becomes now, I want to hire doctors who have that empathy, who can explain it to people, and who are world class because of how they treat their patients, how they make them feel. Like that would make the practice even better. So that's how I see it. What you bring may be different, but there's still something you're going to be able to bring that differentiates you from others. And the old school, being the smartest guy in the room, may not matter as much anymore. Maybe being the most empathetic will.
You know, it's interesting you brought that up because one of the shocker questions I use these days is, so who's the smartest person in the room? Is it the CEO? Maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the COO? Perhaps not. How about the person who's working AI systems 6-7 hours a day? He's 27 years of age. And he's taken an organizational challenge like, let's do a strategy for the next 5 years for our product or service. And they're running it out, wringing it out and running it out. And you say, well, this person is bringing real foresight, a level of foresight and path to us in this organization. That person may be close to the smartest person in the room. So I agree with you. I think it's a very interesting change that we're experiencing. And here's the leadership thing. I'd love to get your reflection on this. If we think we're going to lead and manage organizations like we did 15 or 20 years ago, I just don't see the success there. What do you think?
I think that is the most important statement that's been said here today. I think things have changed, will continue to change even more drastically. And just as humans, we have a hard time of letting go what we've learned, the way things were, especially I think as we get older, like, because we want that 25 years of experience to matter. But if the ground shifts beneath our feet and you don't feel like putting in the time to continue learning and staying up with changes, you will quickly find yourself not very usable. And, there's going to be someone else who understands the current times and the future times better. So I think that statement is maybe the most important thing, that we have to look to the future, not to the past.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let me ask you, we're getting close to the end here, so let me just ask you this last question.
Yep.
What do you believe leadership will require in the next decade? And how can professionals prepare themselves now for what's coming?
I think in the future, it will be that blend of empathy and people skills will always have to be there. We're social animals. You have to have that. I think in the past, it used to be we didn't know enough. So the person who could figure things out without all the information was the person you're looking for. Now I feel like there's almost too much information. So it's the person who can take too much information coming at them, see the signal through the noise, make decisions, and do it in a way with their colleagues and subordinates and even leading up their superiors that makes people feel good about it. I think that we'll never lose that, thank God, that humanity of us. But it's all those other little things that are going to change. But keep your humanity, keep your emotional intelligence, and those things that at least get you in the room.
Yeah. No matter how much technology comes along, in the end, it's always about the people. This has been a pure joy. It's great to see you again. Great to talk to you again. And I'm so happy we made this happen today. Listen, I want to wish you, your company, your family, the greatest successes in the future. Thank you so much for being here today on the podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you.